Here's Guy Wehman, Ben Brunson, and Frank Vernuccio inside the news.
Welcome back to our final segment of Inside the News. Our guys have their hot button topics, but Frank, let's start a little bit about Memorial Day and the reason for the day and why we have it. And some people kind of confuse this with July the 4th, don't they, Frank?
Well, they do, and they also confuse it with Veterans Day. Memorial Day, of course, is a day set aside to honor those of our armed forces who gave their lives in the defense of freedom. When you look at the history of the United States, and it's devastatingly unfortunate that our schools no longer really teach much in the way of true American history. This nation, which has been so successful, has only been successful because of the unbelievable sacrifices of our armed forces, from the suffering at Valley Forge to the horrendous deaths in Normandy and Iwo Jima, right up until the current day. Everything we are as a nation is owed to those men and women who gave their lives in the defense of this country. Far too often that's pushed into the background. I fear that the type of heroism that the teaching of history always instilled in our young people is no longer being done in our schools. We need to start doing that again. The importance of Memorial Day is that it highlights how hard it was to establish this country, to preserve this country, and how important those sacrifices are going to be in the future as well.
You know, Ben, when you go to Middle America, and you'll find that maybe half of the guys in a small high school, they all enlisted, and it's kind of interesting when you start to travel the country and you see how patriotic the flyover states are. Now, I'm not saying that New York's not patriotic, because they have their people too, and California and all. But when you get into these very small towns, they're very fiber. It just seems to be different than the rest of the country. Have you noticed that too, Ben?
Very much so. And of course, that's the source of a great cultural divide that exists in this country now. But thank God we still have a huge chunk of America that is willing to fight and die for this country, the greatest country on earth. And over the last 104 years, since 1916, we've had close to 500,000 American combat deaths in the wars we fought. And it was not for nothing. It was all for something. We have liberated a good portion of this world. We have stopped fascism. We have stopped communism. And now we are stopping the latest fascist ideology, which is this extremist Islam that is unfortunately sweeping a good chunk of this planet. And this country has been the force that has stood in the path and blocked the pathway of all of these evil ideologies for over 100 years. And with God's grace, we're going to continue to do it.
Absolutely. Okay, Frank, your hot button topic for this week.
Well, COVID-19, of course, has wrecked the U.S. economy in many ways, and the various stimulus bills, I think, are missing the mark on how we pull ourselves out of it. There are a couple of things that we need to do that have to be done anyway, but should be done now as a way of pulling us out of COVID-19. There are three areas of weakness that we have. One, of course, is that the power that allowed us to respond to the devastation of Pearl Harbor, since we are in the Memorial Day week, was the U.S. the U.S. ability to build its way out of war, to become the arsenal of democracy. Since that time, though, the industrial might of the United States has diminished sharply. If, heaven forbid, we had to go into a full-scale war with China, we would not have the shipbuilding facilities we need to build the Navy to where it has to be to respond to that threat. One way we can pull ourselves out of this economy, let's rebuild the defense industrial base of the United States. It's thousands upon thousands of good middle-class jobs that could be established if we did that. Number two, we have to rebuild the medical pharmaceutical infrastructure in the United States, and we need to do it quickly. A lot of people have wondered why we haven't responded more forcefully to China already. It's because China has the ability to cut off medicines to the United States, which would leave us in the lurch. Those are two things we have to address, and address very quickly before we can really move on.
Okay, Ben, your hot button topic for this week.
Well, I attended in the past week an online legal webinar held by a major international law firm, which will go unnamed. But they had a partner from Shanghai on the call a Chinese woman who was very knowledgeable and had obviously been in the legal system in China for a long time. And a couple of things struck me. The laws in China very much mimic US and European laws in terms of the way they're written. However, she admitted in a very candid moment that really struck me as saying that courts and judges follow guidelines which are and they're classified. No one knows what the guidelines are, and they're highly classified, and you have to infer them from case law. So it just tells you how the CCP controls the legal system in China.
All right, that was Ben Brunson, and you can see him on our YouTube channel in the bottom and the middle. And Frank Vernuccio on the top left. My name is Guy Wehman. We want to thank you so much for joining us this week, and all of our affiliates across the country as well. We wish for you a very happy Memorial Day, and as you celebrate it with family and friends, take that moment to remember the people who gave their lives for this country as we remember Memorial Day. That is what this is all about. Until next week, for all the guys, we will catch you again next week as we once again go inside the news.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.